Well, thank you everyone for joining us. You have myself, Brent Orsuga with Pinnacle Growth Advisors, and I'm here to interview two associates and friends, Charlie Saffro with CS Recruiting and then Shannon Breen with Freight Vana. So we're actually going to talk about some of our favorite subjects, which are branding and recruiting. So we all have a different lens on this, but I'm going to dive right into it. Let's start with, 24 is a completely different year, right? What are you seeing, Charlie, from the recruiting trend standpoint that's out there within even the brokerage space?
Sure. And you're probably seeing this too. Usually in Q1, we see a huge surge of demand for operational roles, carrier sales, capacity management. This year, we are still stuck in the customer sales phase as it relates to brokerage. So companies are looking for hunters. An unfortunate trend is that there's a lot of short leashes out there. So if you get in and say you're going to produce, you better produce. The good news is I'm starting to see some of the fear in the market dissipate. That was kind of the theme of 23 is hiring freezes because of the uncertainty, and companies are getting a little more aggressive and opportunistic now.
Well, I'm going to kind of stay there for a minute because, Shannon, you may have a different perspective on things, right? We deal with a lot of the brokerages out there, and we're hearing the same thing. You guys as a company, you've hired both experienced people and light people. So talk to us about what does 24 feel like even internally for you guys?
Yeah, I think, to Charlie's points on the market conditions, you really are forced to do more with less, right? And so I think everything's under a microscope. From a financial perspective, I think everybody's seeing that tightening of the belt. And so you're really required to really get creative on roles. We were in a different conversation here at conference and talking about what else can you be doing, right? So you start to find alternative roles to be able to fill, and then certainly if you're hiring someone, the expectations are high, right? I think the job market is certainly tight, and there's not a ton of people hiring, droves and droves of people like we've seen in different types of markets. And so for the people that you're bringing in, the expectations are high, the accountability is really tight, and if you sell the thing, you better come in and produce pretty quick. Otherwise, it just doesn't work with where everybody's sitting right now.
Well, I'm going to stay there again for a second because we hear three words that I think everyone knows: books of business all the time, right? What is the
no non-compete?
Yeah, exactly. Which both are really hard to get around. But what is the lens that you come from as far as that goes? When you're hiring sales reps, maybe from the industry, is there an expectation that maybe some business will come with them at some point that they may just have at bats, or are you just okay just getting talent and letting them start over?
Me personally, year 12, 13, I don't believe in the books of business sale. Yeah. I think it's way oversold.
Agree 100%.
Okay. I watch people that come from really experienced places, and it's funny, multiple people from the same organization will be applying for the job, and they all promote having the same book of business. So I'm so who really has it? Plus, just working inside the walls of one of the largest trucking companies in the country, it doesn't really work like that. The relationships held so many different places, pricing, general managers, all this stuff. Very rarely, whether it's contractually or whether they can just pick up the phone, get you on board, and then just gonna get you fast tracked right to the freight. I just rarely have seen it, so I don't make my personal bets on it. I'm all about talent, attributes, figuring out who fits into our culture. At the end of the day, if you're a performer, you're willing to do the work, then hey, you're probably a fit for us. But I'm never buying books or believe in books of business.
I think that's music to our ears because it's a rarity as far as that goes. What are you seeing, Charlie, when it even comes to not just pure seller type positions? We know ops is kind of paused, but even if we go a layer above that with management type roles, are you seeing coach positions? Is it player coach? What does it feel like a layer up?
Yeah, we are starting to see a return of executive level jobs. So let's call them director and above, which is very optimistic for the market because it means companies are investing, they're diversifying. These are usually opportunity hires. And then I would say from a manager standpoint, I am not a fan of a player coach as a long-term job. It's almost like being cradle to grave. You're going to tap out at some point with your priorities. But I would think that now we are seeing more player coach because it's less risky. So it's we'll bring in someone who can sell and lead, and maybe we'll transition them into a full management role. That's what they want if they're on that path. But player coach is a temporary thing, but it's a low risk hire right now.
And I think you can go both ways on that. I think there's value in somebody getting into a seat, and before you go and coach and lead other people, you kind of get acclimated. The inner working, so I can see values. But even from your angle, what's kind of your perspective? Because we hear it a lot, so I'm curious. On your side.
So I'm literally recruiting for a player coach right now, and the reality is we're at an interesting spot as an inflection point as a company where I can hire someone that works maybe at a bigger company, has a different level of experience, but who are they going to come in and coach? Like, you really have to build the team. You have to build the processes. I need you to come in and help create the foundational structure. Oh, and by the way, as long as I'm still doing some of the work in a certain way, like, my expectation would be you can come in and work just as hard or equally as hard alongside me, right? And so, for an organization like ours, we are selling a player coach. I agree that it's not a forever job, but it's almost like, hey, if you've got the right attributes, come build a team, come build the processes, and coach your way out of being a player. Right, and I think that is just the reality of where we sit. You don't have the ability to just have people coach. Who are you going to coach? But you also need someone that can build and spend the time and intentionality on building that stuff internally.
Makes perfect sense. I'm going to pivot us a little bit to talk about branding, something that both of you, I think myself too, do a really good job at, right? But even yourself, right? We know that you have a massive kind of following, and it's not even really just about recruiting. You show your life, you kind of show yoga, kids, your husband, all these things that, like, I've gotten to know about you as well. What's kind of your angle with that, right? So, like, has that led to you even getting business just by being more vulnerable, authentic, showing yourself?
Yeah, my angle is I'm human, and we talk a lot about treating employees like humans and creating, human leadership. And it took me many, many years to use my voice on LinkedIn. I used it for connections and networking. But I found that when I started using my voice, people connected with me as a human. And the first thing I ever posted that went viral was a video of one of my kids, and then people started DMing me like, wait, I didn't know you had kids, and we're hiring. I'd love to set up a call. So, I find that I post what's true to me and what feels right. It does drive business very indirectly, but I'm not looking to measure my ROI on my content because I do it because it's, part of just the thought leadership I enjoy.
Well, and I would agree. I can't tell you how many calls that I've gotten just because, oh, you play basketball, you're a girl dad. Little things like that. Like, we were really, neither one of us post about, hey, we need this job in Chicago, right?
Or what we do.
100%.
Right.
So you're drawing people in a different angle. And you guys, I think, were really in the last 18 months at the forefront of encouraging employee branding, right? Like, getting your people out in front of it, not just from a leadership standpoint. So talk to us about that, and did that work well for you guys?
I think it has worked well for us, right? We started from scratch in the middle of a pretty terrible freight economy, which everybody is fully aware of. But I think the keys to ours was the authenticity that you mentioned, and then what you really see is an empowerment. So I worked at a place before where I always tell people it was 10 sign-offs to do a social media post, and then by the time you did that, you've been classically conditioned to not even ask. Right?
Yes.
And so when we started Freightvana, we were really intentional about, hey, we're going to hire good people. We're going to trust really good people. We love the personalities, the unique personalities. Like, if you follow our brand and our people, everybody's got a unique style about them. And ultimately, that just leads to goodness. And I think the coolest thing that I would share that's just been so special is, like, the love and the support that comes from what we've done, the creativeness we've brought. We've got our, friends of Freightvana. When people see our trailers, and you're like, you look at trailers, and, you're in trucking, you see trailers. But to have, like, a following and a community that we've curated that's just almost like along with you for the ride, and they're like, oh, I saw a trailer, and they're willing to post that. Like, to me, that is so special for something that's really commoditized and no one really cares about. Like, those are the special moments of what we've done in empowering our people and letting people have a voice.
Well, I think you hit it on the head, because Charlie and I'm sure you deal with this too. Like, people actually ask us those questions now. Like, is this a company that is going to embrace me to build my own personal brand? Look, in 24, it's a real thing. So I think you guys do a good job at that.
You do a great job at that.
I just had an interview the other day, and literally the final question that one of the candidates asked is like, hey, so if I join the team, are you open to me doing this, and that? I said, if that's something that you're passionate about, we're open to it. We don't force that on people. It's, we've got plenty of people that don't want to be on social media, but, like, you could tell this particular candidate was coming from an environment, and he just was like, hey, if I'm part of this brand, like, I get a chance to do these things I've never got to do in my career. And you could just see that sparkle in his eye. And that was how we ended our interview, and I just loved it.
But the reason you can trust and empower employees to do that is because your leadership team is posting and leading by example. So I think you guys are guiding the way, showing, like, what topics are appropriate, and then your team is inspired to do it. So keep up at it.
Yeah, what I think too, just from a video dynamic, I've always told people we live in a visual world, right? What do we even consume ourselves, right? So I think just encouraging that behavior. But I can't tell you how many companies I've told, why are you not doing a day in the life, right? An office video tour. You can grab an iPhone these days and do some of those things as far as that goes. But that's very interesting to hear, because I know some people like in the wealth advisor space, you hit it on the head. 10 sign-offs, it loses its luster. All of a sudden it feels staged. I guarantee a lot of your people are just kind of off the cuff as far as that goes.
Yeah, and you only have to coach when maybe it goes a little too far. And hey, I'm going to just say, like, out of all the people in the almost 3 years we've been doing it, there hasn't been a couple of times where you're like, maybe we have like one side conversation, but that's sub 5%, right? And if you know anything about business, right, you don't want to coach or manage your business to the 5%, right? You're there for the 95%, and the 95% is good, and it's wholehearted, and it's authentic, and it's positive, and it's industry hopefully insightful, and so that's what we really support.
I'm going to go back to recruiting just for a second before we wrap up, and like, talk to us about almost like a 90-day strategy, right? Like everyone, now we're kind of even starting to think about Q3. We know election year, Q4 could be funky. No one has a crystal ball, but it could be different, right? How far out do you guys kind of plan or strategize even when it comes to a hiring standpoint?
Yeah, I've got some key roles and stuff I presented to the team the other day, and so we're looking probably 12 months.
Wow.
Right? Because we're also in an interesting inflection point with our growth path and the leadership roles we want to have. And so there's leadership roles that we know we need, but we also need to stage them because, hey, the economics and making sure from being prudent with the financials. And so I'd say for us, it's about 12 months. You got strategic hires, you got critical hires, and then we've got a group that we would call bets. What bets are we willing to make at what level, when, and like what are we looking at to make it? So we've got like these requirement ones, and then also have like these fill-ins that look like maybe options, like, hey, depending on how the next month goes, maybe we bring in one of these, and, so you start to fill out your roster. But I'd say 12 months for me. I don't have anything past that, honestly.
But I think that's actually really good, because how many people call us and they're in a time critical or urgent standpoint, and I'm like, you're 4 to 8 weeks from this point in a good scenario. Right?
And then when you ask them when you're trying to fill the position and it was last week, like now your procrastination is now my problem to solve. So thank you.
Yeah. So anyways, well, I appreciate you guys joining us, and we're going to make this short and sweet, but I'm glad we touched on branding. I'm glad we touched on recruiting, and I wish both of you success in 24.
All right.